Hey, fourth graders! So many of you are watching these and it makes me so happy. Z, your mom just sent me a picture of you watching it and I was so happy. I couldn't stop smiling. So, here is chapter 5. Winn-Dixie couldn't stand to be left alone. We found that out real quick. If me and the preacher went off and left him by himself in the trailer, he pulled all the cushions off the couch and all the toilet paper off the roll. We started to try tying him up outside with a rope when we left, but that didn't work either. Winn-Dixie howled until Samuel, Mrs. Dwetler's dog, started howling too. It was exactly the kind of noise that people in an all-adult trailer park did not like to hear. He just doesn't want to be left alone, I told the preacher. That's all. Let's just take him with us. I could understand the way Winn-Dixie felt. Getting left behind probably made his heart feel pretty empty. After a while, the preacher gave in, and everywhere we went, we took Winn-Dixie, even to church. The Open Arms Baptist Church of Naomi isn't a regular-looking church. The building used to be a Pick-It-Quick store, and when you walk in the front door, the first thing you see is the Pick-It-Quick motto. It's written on the floor in little tiny red tiles that make great big letters that say, "Pick, pick, pick, quick, quick, quick." The preacher tried painting over those tiles, but the letters won't stay covered up, and so the preacher has just given up and let them be. The other thing about the Open Arms is that it's different from other churches in the way that there aren't any pews. People bring in their own fold-up chairs and their lawn chairs, and so sometimes it looks more like a parade or a barbecue instead of a congregation. It kind of is a strange church, and I thought Winn-Dixie would fit right in with that. But the first time we brought Winn-Dixie to the Open Arms, the preacher tied him up outside the front door. Why did we bring him all the way just so we would tie him up? I asked the preacher. Because dogs don't belong in a church, Opal, the preacher said. That's why. We tied Winn-Dixie up to a tree, and he said how there was lots of shade for him, and that it ought to be a good place, and it would work out just fine. Well, it didn't. The service started, and there was some singing, and some laughing, and some praying, and some sharing. And then the preacher started preaching. And he wasn't but 2 or 3 words into the sermon when there was a terrible howl coming from outside. The preacher tried to ignore it. "Today," he said. "Ah-ooh," said Winn-Dixie. "Please," said the preacher. "Ah-ooh," said Winn-Dixie back. "Friends," said the preacher. "Ah-ooh," wailed Winn-Dixie. Everyone turned their lawn chairs into fold-up chairs and looked at one another. "Opal," said the preacher. "Ah-ooh," said Winn-Dixie. "Yes, sir," I said. "Go get that dog," he yelled. "Yes, sir," I yelled back. I went outside and untied Winn-Dixie, and I brought him inside. He sat down right next to me and smiled up at the preacher. The preacher couldn't help it, but smile back. Winn-Dixie had that effect on him. And so the preacher started to preach again. Winn-Dixie sat there, listening to it, wiggling his ears the way that he did, trying to catch all those words. And everything would have been all right, except that a mouse ran across the floor. The Open Arms had mice. They were there when it was a Pick-It-Quick, and there were lots of good things for them to eat in that building when it was a Pick-It-Quick. But when it became Open Arms Baptist Church of Naomi, the mice stayed around to eat all the leftover crumbs from a potluck supper or a gathering or something. The preacher kept on saying that he was going to have something to do with them, but he never did. Because the truth is, he couldn't stand the thought of hurting anything, even a mouse. Well, Winn-Dixie saw that mouse, and he was up and after him. 1 minute, everything was quiet and serious, and the preacher was going on and on and on. And the next minute, Winn-Dixie looked like a furry bullet, shooting across that building, chasing the mouse. He was barking, and his feet were skidding all over that polished Pick-It-Quick floor. And people were clapping and hollering and pointing. They really went wild when Winn-Dixie actually caught the mouse. "I have never in my life seen a dog catch a mouse," said Mrs. Nordley. She was sitting right next to me. "He's a special dog," I told her. "I imagine so," she said back. Winn-Dixie stood up there in front of the whole church, wagging his tail and holding the mouse real careful in his mouth, holding on to him tight, but not squishing him. I believe that mutt must got some retriever in him, said somebody behind me. That's a hunting dog. Winn-Dixie took the mouse over to the preacher and dropped it at his feet. And when the mouse tried to get away, Winn-Dixie put his paw right onto the mouse's tail. Then he smiled up at the preacher. He showed him all his teeth. The preacher looked down at the mouse. He looked at Winn-Dixie. He looked at me. He rubbed his nose. It got real quiet in that picket-quick. Let us pray, the preacher finally said, for this mouse. And everybody started laughing and clapping, and the preacher picked up the mouse by the tail. He walked it and threw it out the front doors of the picket-quick, and everybody applauded again. Then he came back and we all prayed together. I prayed for my mama. I told God how much she would enjoy hearing this story about Winn-Dixie catching the mouse. It would have made her laugh. I asked God if maybe I could be the one to tell her the story someday. And then I talked to God about how I was lonely in Naomi, because I didn't know many people here, especially kids. Only the ones from church. And there weren't that many kids in the open arms. Just Donlip and Stevie Dewberry, two brothers that weren't twins, but they looked like they were. And Amanda Wilkinson, whose face was always pinched up like she was smelling something real bad. And Sweetie Pie Thomas, who was only 5 years old and still mostly a baby. And none of them wanted to be my friend anyway, because they probably thought I'd tell on them to the preacher for every little thing they did wrong. And then they would get in trouble with God and their parents. So I told God that I was lonely, even having Winn-Dixie. Finally, I prayed for the mouse, like the preacher suggested. I prayed that he didn't get hurt when he went out flying out that door. I prayed that he landed on a nice soft patch of grass. All right, that was chapter 5. Bye, guys.